All right, everybody, welcome back to the second half of the trading day. Adjust a setting here so my camera doesn't look so dark. Adjust a setting here. That's a little bit better. So let's take a look at where we sit. The equity indices had dropped into negative territory briefly, with the exception of the NASDAQ 100 and the composite. I think they were close, but they didn't quite get there. The Dow Jones is now up 145. The index is up 77 and change. The composite's up almost 70. The S&P is up 15. The RUT's up 6.5. Futures are also up pretty close. I mean, the Dow is up 175, 174. The NASDAQ is up 75. The S&P is up 17.5, and the Russell's up 8.6. VIX is up, and VIX futures are down. VIX is up about 2.39%, so nothing like crazy. VIX is now below 20. It took a long time to get there from having been elevated. I mean, it peaked at 38 during the regular trading session, like the second day of declines, and in the overnight it had spiked up to 50 but came back down. It was hovering around between 24 and 26. Now the fact that it's below 20, a little bit more normal. That doesn't mean that volatility has gone away. What it does mean, however, is anybody who chose to short volatility made the right call. I don't know that shorting volatility now would make any sense. I would probably advocate waiting to see if it spikes up again. The dollar index is down almost 0.5%. Gold's down, crude's up. Crude's knocking on the door of 61. Let's take a look at what the yen is doing. Yen futures are up 0.61%, so 0.6%. Now, I was reading on Bloomberg, I think it said the yen was strengthening against the rand. Now, the reason why that is important is that the South African rand, had spiked up after it was in anticipation of Jacob Zuma stepping down, which he ultimately did. He announced his resignation. Okay, not showing any trades here, so I don't know of any way to check on that. Let's check the yen against the British pound. Call it flat. Anyway, enough of that nonsense. So looking at the NASDAQ futures, pretty much seem to be looking at a short here. I mean, it's, obviously it peaked at this 67.83. We're seeing some weakness. Peak occurred about 20, 25 minutes ago. Which explains the deterioration of my position for the day. I mean, Facebook has been just not really doing much of anything. The emerging markets are up. I'm waiting for, if there's a pullback, I might cover this short call if I think that the emerging markets are going to keep going up. I still want to play that one by ear. Autodesk is still looking pretty strong today. Off of its highs of the day. But above this 112.84 level, which it had been testing, I had went ahead and sold these 113 calls in anticipation of that possibly being a level of resistance. But so far Autodesk has done a good job holding above that level. It tested it at about 10, again, so this is Eastern time, about 10:22, and tested it again at about 10 after 11. Fell back through, tested it one time more over lunch at about noon, and again at 12:10, and this is where we see it now. So really the afternoon for me is just going to be about monitoring the NASDAQ futures and taking a stand, picking a trade accordingly. If I can get charts to load, that would always be nice. It's always nice when your broker can load charts, like without significant delay, because that's how you make decisions sometimes. Maybe it's just me, I don't know. I guess charts are just a luxury that I'll have to learn to do without right now. I might have to create a support request. These charts are loaded, so let's redraw our trend lines. This trend line here, this green one, is still valid. This one here needs adjusted, which I just did. I mean, if I want to draw a tertiary trend line, I can, for what it's worth. So right now it's just kind of a tug of war between the bears and the bulls, pretty evenly matched. If this were to trade sideways through or break down, because you've got a level of support here at the pivot, that is R1. That can be deleted. That was an old risk marker. right now, you know, you don't really have a short until we get up here. So that's another way of saying I think the plays right now are to the long side. I'd rather be long of this than short of it right now. You know, I would want to wait for a pullback to about here, where my cursor is drawing a line right now, you know, somewhere around there. You know, possibly wait to see if it trades down to this 3-period or 9-period MA, which it could. As the MA drifts up, there's going to be a meeting point somewhere around here. But, you know, it's not going to be long. I mean, this is only a 1-minute chart, so it's not going to be long if this continues before that gets up there. And I'm going to have to do something because I cannot sit and just wait for this chart to draw. So, you know, resetting it or something. Well, I guess we just build it from scratch. I mean, since the workspace, you know, it could be the workspace is corrupted. I don't know. I mean, I never thought that my job was to be technician, not the good kind of technician, like not a technical analyst. Like my job is now tech support. So I'm doing tech support for free, apparently. So I apologize, folks, that you have to. You know, it's not fair to me. It's not fair to you to have to sit through that. You know, you tune in so you can learn things, not to watch charts attempt to draw. Okay. So yeah, I mean, we're basically just kind of waiting. You know, if the stochastics push this down through trend line, this is the trend line it's holding right now. If that holds, which it might for a while, but I wouldn't count on it for too long because, you know, we're seeing, I mean, we just got confirmation of a crossover here. You know, this was looking bullish, but we've got pressure, we got downside pressure from the next time frame over the 15-minute. I think this is a short, to be honest with you. So it looks like we're running into a little bit of trouble. Because now we have some short-term buying pressure here, pushing this back up. And while I don't want to get spooked out of this trade, I don't want to hang on for too long either. I think I need to pick a better spot. That's the problem with having to build the workspace from scratch, is some of my indicators aren't there. I mean, there's supposed to be a study indicator over here so that I can easily just click on it. I'm not showing any studies. So let's see what the instructions are. So now we're actually in more rally mode. It did trade below that trend line, but then it traded back up again. So the fact that this trend line has been violated means it's really no longer useful to us. I know that I've been an advocate of like leaving, trend lines on the chart so that you can, because past resistance is future support, but sometimes, especially like when it's such a short-term trend line, you're kind of waiting to see what the price action does. If it violates your trend line but then it shoots back up again, then that just means you just need to slightly adjust your trend line. No reason, just kind of leave it there and draw a new one. That's just going to make your chart a mess. And it's frustrating, and I've never told you who my broker is. I'm not going to. If you figure it out, that's fine. But it's really frustrating when, you reach out to your broker for tech support and they give you the same tired, canned answers all over again, without actually like taking some time to diagnose and figure out like what the problem is. And it's always like, oh, you're running too many charts, you have too many studies, blah 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 blah. All this nonsense. When in reality it doesn't address the issue of why are my charts drawing on one platform, on one workspace, but not in another. Like I have multiple instances of the software open. I've got 3 instances of the software open. I've got 3 monitors open. I'm using 3 monitors. Charts take forever to draw on one workspace, but not on the other. So it's not a problem with the resources of the video card. It's not a question of them being split. All right, it's something's wrong with that implementation. Workspace is corrupted or whatever, and I've been told, hey, your workspace is corrupted. I don't buy that either, because I followed instructions to blow the workspace away and rebuild it. I still have the same problem. So I mean, it happens when when you have a development team that you don't want to spend money on your development team, so you get what you pay for. That's basically the bottom line, and it's your clients that suffer for it. And I'm not saying that there aren't talented people in the development team. The problem is the people who front end the user requests. It's not helpful at all. Yep. Okay. Had to cut my mic for a second. I'm not trying to send an empty message. I wanted to take those indicators off this chart. I don't really need them. I do want to look at volume as it compares to average volume, because looking at this chart kind of out of the corner of my eye, it just looked like, I mean, now something's happening, but it just was really just kind of stuck in that area. Like it looked like some trades were happening, but not a lot. I think I also had these Bollinger Bands. A little wider. Yeah, because it's not very helpful. I mean, when most of the price action is outside of the Bollinger Bands, it doesn't help much. Like, if I have these set to, so these are set to 2, these were set to 2 standard deviations by default. I set it to 3, so that most of the price action was contained within the bands, unless something like this happened that was actually pushing the bands out. So it helps me. It's just better. It's more helpful for me if I can visualize it. So now we're trading back through the trend line. And keep in mind that when you're watching a symbol like this, everything that happens, regardless of, even if it's something you cannot trade on, is helpful information, because what we're learning here is, to put it plainly, there's a disagreement between the bulls and the bears about where value really should be right now. Sometimes that manifests itself in very little price action. Sometimes it manifests itself in a lot of chop back and forth. Sometimes it manifests itself, when, for example, when the bears capitulate and they agree, yeah, value should be higher, than the bulls take over and they shoot the price up, or vice versa. So I'll show you what's happening. I mean, basically, we've got the visualization of downward price pressure here and here, and somewhat here, right? But here we've got some upward pressure on the 15-minute. If we zoom out, look at the 1 hour, we're seeing that as well. So as I look at it, as I think about it that way, I think the bulls have the upper hand here. So now we're getting a lift. You can see it happening here. So now we're getting some upward momentum. And it's driving towards that high, 67.8375. So it's now broken through. And closing above that level is good, but now it's going to trade back down below. So we see this where we get, hitting fresh highs and then some hesitation, some hemming, some hawing. It pulls back a little bit. And then we get a fresh move up. Like that. Now we're seeing that push back up again. The problem is it seems almost as if these pushes are getting weaker and weaker. So if the bulls are getting tired, if they're running out of steam, you know, that's something to be mindful of. Or are they getting a second wind? I mean, you know. See, inability to push to higher highs is something you want to watch out for. You know, higher high, higher high, higher high. See, when you push to a higher high and immediately you back off, not good. See, now it looks like we might have a short play shaping up, and we don't have a lot of in the way here. We don't have a bunch of moving averages bunched up, that are acting as levels of support. When faster moving averages get extended from slower moving averages, and when price action itself gets too far above moving averages, it can make you a little nervous. So what we need is for a move down here on the part of our slow stochastic, actually across both of these time frames, because there's some weak longs there need to be shaken out. Sometimes when you see a push up like this, a pullback like to about halfway point, sometimes that can be a good buy point. You don't want to buy when there's no wick above you. There's no shadow up there, because that means that it's just it's pushing. Like when you have a candle that's moving up, this line right here, that's your most recent close, like your most recent trade until a bar closes. So if your most recent trade was at the highs of the candle, and you put in a market order, then your market order is probably going to be the blow off top, and then it's going to come back in and it's going to go against you. You want to buy on weakness and sell on strength, not the other way around. Probably seeing a very similar picture in the other indices. Now with the Dow, the Dow is shaping up for a short much better than the NASDAQ is right now. And And actually, if I had stayed in, I mean, it just traded right through that MA, that 9-period MA. That was just kind of a test trade. Now, what I was in the middle of saying before I realized that I didn't have a percent change column here was that, you know, the Dow was shaping up for a short better than the NASDAQ 100 futures because of relative weakness. I mean, the NASDAQ 100 futures are showing the most strength right now, and the Dow, the S&P, and the RUT are all on par. They're all about, you know, 95 basis points up. Now, so watching that price action, sometimes watching the price action of other indices can give you a clue of what's going to happen elsewhere. So in this case, was comparing the charts for the Dow futures to what we were just looking at with the NASDAQ, and it looked like the Dow futures were shaping up for a short, which is that the crystal ball that tells us what the NASDAQ is going to do? Because, you know, a lot of times, I mean, because these indices, they move with such high correlation to each other, but it's not perfect correlation. You know, on some days, the Dow was the leader, and on other days, it's the NASDAQ, and on other days, it's the Russell. See, like, that's a good time to sell into strength. Because, oh, that was weird. Hold on. Because stochastic slow is still exhibiting downward momentum. Stochastic fast has traded down into oversold and is trading back up again. Seeing the same thing on this chart over here. on the 1 minute. Now, because we have confirmation of a bearish crossover, we know that the trade is short. There's an hour left in the trading day. If we believe the trade is short, we can get in now, but we're going to have some pain as we watch a loss build. If you want to get the best trade location, what I'm waiting for is either to see, fast stochastic trade back up into overbought and then reverse and come back down. That's a good time to buy. Or wait to see if it's doing what it's doing now, which is bouncing off of that slow stochastic and moving back down. Now in the case of the Dow hasn't hit its highs yet from the overnight session. Because when futures set a high like that in the overnight session, it's usually not the case that the high is set in the overnight session. In other words, more often than not, that high gets taken out during daytime trading. So what the Dow futures are trying to do right now is they're trying to move back up to that 25,157. and try and take it out. And I should have set my I should have brought that in a couple ticks. I would have held on to more of that profit. Or held on for longer because it just broke through. So you can see what happened. It set a high in the overnight session and traded down all this way just so it could travel all the way back up again and touch the high point in the daytime, during daytime trading. Now what it does is anybody's guess. We need to find a time frame where there was a higher high. So we can do a Fibonacci. Assuming that there was one, but I know that there was right here. been spending a lot of time around here. Which that is a level of resistance / support. I can remove that. The play now is to the downside. At least to there. Trying to decipher what these things are going to do is like a puzzle. You look at this across time frames, you see, from this perspective, you're between two moving averages. You see the tendency is to move down. The same thing with here. This is between the 9 and the 27 period MA. Here you've got this 9 period moving average. But you look over here in the 15-minute and you see, okay, this 9 period moving average, like it's a different time frame, so it's above that. So this is either going to trade down here and bounce, which it just did, but what's a longer term? Like a longer term, what's it going to do? Is it going to trade down and close below? Because if it's going to trade down and close below, then what that tells me is, okay, then I would expect it to trade here, trade down to this 25061 level, or maybe not to that level, to wherever this 27 period MA moves up to. And figuring all that stuff out is what makes this fun / frustrating. If you like puzzles, and you'll like it a lot more than if you don't like puzzles. You know, trading on this time frame here, which is what I've been doing. I'm watching this. Waiting to see if stochastic slow crosses back up into overbought, or if we're just going to get a crossover and a downside move. What I do know is that that is inevitable. Like, that is happening. That's what this is this is telegraphing that that's going to happen. You've got more than one histogram in a row that is declining. More than one histogram bar, I should say. Should we check back in with our friend the NASDAQ? What's the NASDAQ doing? The NASDAQ looks like it's setting up for a more immediate short, at least if you look at the 15-minute time frame, because we now have both slow and fast in overbought territory. We've got a stochastic fast making its way into overbought. We have a stochastic fast on this chart here, which just did that. And here we are having to adjust our trend line again. Which is not at all surprising because this move is so steep. You know, if I had started drawing this at 10:30 this morning, it would have been here, and I would have adjusted it here, then here, then here, then here. So really that's a point of interest right there. because this is your downtrend boundary, this is your uptrend boundary. When it gets to this point, it's got a decision to make. For those of you that wanted to get into trading because you thought it was glamorous, I hope I've dispelled that notion. It's a lot of this. It's a lot of looking, waiting. When your volatility comes in, which ATR is a way of measuring volatility, which is basically just the amplitude of price action. In other words, how wide is the price action? The wider the price action is, the more this spikes, like here. Now, just because trading isn't glamorous doesn't mean you can't have fun doing it. If you like economics, finances, staying on top of the current events, if you like puzzles, problem solving, If you enjoy being humbled on a regular basis, just when you think you've got it figured out, the market proves to you it can still throw you a few curveballs. Like that. This is kind of the short that I've been waiting all afternoon on. Because we're seeing the weakness here, we're seeing it shape up here. And literally, you might wait all afternoon for that opportunity to present itself. And if you get in a little early, you're going to be sitting on pins and needles while it goes against you because you're waiting for that short to. Sometimes a trade has to season. It's got to sit there. You know, the bulls and the bears, they have to fight it out before the bulls, in this case, before the bulls finally capitulate. Like, that's the place to get out right now. Now, if I wanted to stay in it, I could have stayed in it, and then I wait for this next bar to form. And if it looks like it's going to continue moving to the downside, I can add to my position. Which is really what I should have done. Or wait for the next opportunity, which, looking at this, we're going to get because we're going to travel up here, maybe up here. One thing I don't like doing is trading the last 15 minutes of the day because it's so volatile. I don't like getting into a position. If I'm already in one and it's worked for me, sometimes if it doesn't work immediately in your favor, you just got to get out. So you don't want to give it a chance to move against you. Sometimes you just got to put it in a stranglehold. And unfortunately, the way I've been trading these futures today, I have not been efficient. I will admit I have not been efficient. In addition to having some trades that have gone against me, I've done a lot of trades, and I really should be, like, my profit and loss right now should be about, just these two futures should probably be about $400 or $500. I'm at 110. So no, that's not the best result. And it looks like we maybe get another play to the short side. And that's why I don't like trading the last 15 minutes of the day. So now I'm basically flat on my futures trades for the day. It's a loss if you think of commissions. All right, well, so much for that. I would like to catch one decent move here before it fizzles out. See, I just have this gut telling me that this is where it's going to go. You know, and you can't wait for it to make that move. I mean, you can't steal second if your foot's on first. And it's just making these very hesitant, very weak, very craven moves one way or the other. You know, very kind of like, oh, I'm afraid to even put my toe in the water kind of moves. So at least I have vindication I was right. I just didn't, I wasn't in the trade when it happened. And, you know, not only is it like trading to that point, it's trading through that point. Like it wants to make a move to the 73.6 fib. So the 2 o'clock bell, the 4 o'clock bell rang. I didn't even notice. So what looks like it's shaping up in a minute, in a second, I'm going to kind of go over what I think is shaping up for the overnight session. Because we've got 333 ticks, 1 minute, 4 minute, 15 minute. You can see it shooting to the upside in the last, 15 minutes before they take the break at 4:15. Overbought, 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 overbought. Bought, overbought, moving towards overbought, right? So Let me remove some unnecessary drawings. Okay. Change this to a 1 minute. All right, this is where it opened. Okay. The 50% fib, like if we draw a Fibonacci here, the 50% fib is almost where it opened. Okay, now we'll wait for this to settle down, like what the actual close is. I would not be a bit surprised if in the overnight it traded all the way back down to the open. If I draw, or rather if I do a time profile, which is kind of what I like to look at, to kind of predict, I shouldn't say predict, but to identify a range of where tomorrow's price action might be, and this includes the overnight too. So yeah, we can very well see it trade through the open. Because here's the reality. I mean, the bulls that we're trading today are not going to be trading the overnight. They've taken their money and run with it. So, to recap, the Dow was up 307, NASDAQ 100 up 120, Composite up 113, S&P up 33, 32.5. The RUT was up 15. The RUT was the laggard. I mean, it was up 99, so 0.99%. So call it 1%. The leader was the NASDAQ 100, which we saw most of the day. What was interesting is that earlier in the day, the NASDAQ was the leader. The Dow, the S&P, and the Russell were all around the same level in terms of percentage, and not that they widened the gap to a great extent, but they did widen the gap. Futures, these aren't close prices yet, but the futures are up, Dow's up 370, the NASDAQ 100 futures are up 127, S&P futures are up 37, and the Russell's up 17. So the futures moved by an even greater margin than the cash markets did. You can take that as a prediction that, a bullish prediction, because that's what the future is telling you, is that, the future is green for the major indices. The VIX is down 0.6%. The VIX futures are down 2%. So the VIX futures are telling you that volatility is going to continue to get sucked out of this market. I mean, the VIX index is at 19. The VIX futures are at 17.5. Dollar index down 60 basis points. Gold down 16 basis points. Crude was cruising today, up 61.2, up to 61.28. It was up 1.3, so 1.25%. The yen, Japanese yen, continued to be strong. It was up almost a whole percent today. So the strong yen trade is continuing. Don't know if that's a fundamental trade or if that's a flight to safety trade. If it was a flight to safety trade, you have to ask the question, well, then why isn't gold participating? The Swiss franc was up by the same amount. Swiss franc relative to the Japanese yen was down 6 basis points, so the yen was slightly stronger than the Swiss franc. So take that for what it's worth. Anyway, time for me to turn the stream off and, end of the day with a small profit. I was going to say go and nurse my wounds because I gave a lot back, but tomorrow's another day. Tomorrow's the last day of the week, and then we have a holiday on Monday. It's President's Day, so we'll have one more day to rest before we go into the new week. So have a great night, everybody.